Amanda was radiant that night. The party atmosphere was charged with energy, with laughter and applause echoing throughout the brightly lit hall. The bright lights reflected off the champagne glasses as she received greetings from colleagues and friends. The promotion to marketing director at the renowned technology company where I worked was more than recognition. It was the culmination of years of effort and dedication. Dressed in an elegant black dress, she looked like the embodiment of success. "Congratulations, Amanda. You deserve this," said Lucas, one of his closest colleagues, as he raised his glass in a toast. "Thank you, Lucas. I wouldn't have gotten this far without the support of all of you," Amanda replied, her smile lighting up the room. But deep down, a shadow of insecurity accompanied her. What she really wanted was the approval of her mother, Helen, who had always disapproved of her. With the microphone in hand, Amanda went up to the small improvised stage. The murmur of the crowd fell silent, and she began her speech, her voice firm and full of emotion. "I always dreamed of being here, in a place where my work is recognized," she began, looking at the audience. "But this achievement did not come easily. I faced many challenges, especially those who told me I couldn't do it. My mother." A strategic pause, while looking down, as if the words were bothering her. "She always had her expectations, and many times, she discouraged me." A murmur of surprise ran through the audience. Amanda felt butterflies in her stomach, but continued. "I realized that the only way to move forward was to distance myself from these negative voices. And that's what I did. This is a moment of celebration, and I'm here, not only to celebrate my achievement, but to show everyone that, with determination, it is possible to overcome any obstacle." The applause was thunderous, but Amanda's joy was only superficial. The first thing she thought of after the speech was Helen. The contempt she felt for her mother gnawed at her, but the feeling of triumph also left her a little satisfied, as if she had freed herself from those bonds. As the party continued, Amanda walked to the bar. She ordered a drink and watched the dance floor full of people having fun. The atmosphere was celebratory, but the lack of his mother's presence weighed heavily on his heart. There was an emptiness that she tried to ignore. A year had passed since Helen left his life, and the decision to take her away wasn't easy, but it seemed necessary. That same night, in a small apartment in a remote neighborhood, Helen watched the party on television. The images of her daughter shining at a glamorous event were a deep blow to her heart. Sadness and loneliness followed her like shadows. The woman looked at the screen, remembering a younger Amanda, full of dreams and hopes. The pain of rejection enveloped her as she recalled the difficult times she had faced raising her daughter. "I did everything for you, Amanda. All," Helen whispered to herself, as tears ran down her face. "And now you despise me as if I were a burden." The memories played through his mind like a movie. The sleepless nights, the worries about bills, the efforts to give her daughter a better life. Helen remembered how Amanda excelled at school, how she had tried hard to encourage her, even when the circumstances were adverse. However, the mother's expectations seemed to have become a burden for her daughter. "I just wanted you to be happy," he murmured, as he turned off the television. The loneliness of that moment was suffocating. The woman stood up and looked out the window, watching life go by outside, while her own life seemed to stagnate. At Amanda's house, the party continued in full swing. The loud music and lively conversations were a stark contrast to Helen's loneliness. However, Amanda couldn't escape her mother's thoughts. A part of her knew that the relationship was strained, but pride prevented her from making peace. And so, the night went on, full of laughter and toasts, while somewhere the mother felt invisible and forgotten. Later, when the party was over and most of the guests had said goodbye, Amanda was alone in her room. She looked at the reflection of herself in the mirror. The shine of her dress and her perfectly applied lipstick couldn't hide the restlessness that consumed her. The phone vibrated on the table, and when he looked, he saw a message from a friend he hadn't seen at the party. "Congratulations, Amandina. You rocked it. Shall we celebrate some more?" She smiled, but the joy seemed forced. The woman decided she needed time alone. With a sigh, Amanda walked to the window and looked out. The city lights shone like stars, But what she really wanted was her mother's presence. "What did I do?" she murmured, without waiting for a response. The weight of her decisions weighed heavily on her, and the silent night held no answers, only more questions. It was then that the phone rang again. This time it was an unknown number. Hesitantly, she answered. "Amanda?" The voice on the other end sounded familiar, but distant. It was Helen. The young woman felt her heart accelerate. He didn't expect to hear from his mother again, especially after the way he had treated her. "Hi, Mom," Amanda replied, her voice shaking. "What do you want?" "I just wanted to know how you are," Helen said, trying to hide the pain in her voice. "I saw your party on television. You were beautiful." Amanda took a deep breath, anger and resentment rising at the same time as sadness. The memory of all the battles they had made her feel torn. "I'm fine," she replied, the coldness in her voice. "And you? How are you?" "I'm surviving," Helen said, the sincerity in her words palpable. "But I don't care about that. I just wanted to hear your voice." The silence that followed was heavy. Amanda felt a lump in her throat. She wanted to scream, say everything that was bothering her, but at the same time, she felt exhausted. The anger that consumed her was now mixed with a dose of guilt. "Mom, I can't do this now. I am busy." The answer came out harsher than I intended. "I understand. I just hope you know that I will always be here for you. No matter what," Helen said, the sadness evident in her voice. "That's not enough," Amanda replied, frustration exploding. "You were always critical, you always demotivated me. I can't live like this." "Amanda, I never wanted to demotivate you. I only wanted the best for you," Helen pleaded, but the young woman was already in her own emotional storm. "The best for me?" Amanda laughed, but there was no joy in her laugh. "You just made me feel like I was never good enough. I need distance. You can't do this." "I'm your mother," Helen said, her voice shaking, "and you are no longer part of my life." Amanda screamed, her heart beating wildly. "I can't take any more of your criticism. Amanda, please." "He arrives." "Enough." The young woman hung up the phone with a bang, the sound of the click echoing like thunder in her mind. Anger consumed her, but at the same time, a wave of regret enveloped her. Alone in her room, Amanda felt that something inside her had changed. That call was not just an outburst, but a deep cut between mother and daughter, and as loneliness surrounded her, she realized that perhaps, deep down, she was heading towards an abyss she didn't know how to avoid. Helen looked up at the gray sky above her head as she walked through the busy streets of the city, now a familiar place but once just a backdrop to her memories. Loneliness weighed on her shoulders like a cloak, and the reality of her new life as a homeless person hugged her tightly. There was no longer the comfort of her home, nor the distant affection, but she still felt alive, a feeling she hadn't expected to find there. For the first few days, Helen was lost in her own thoughts, wandering the sidewalks and listening to the voices of the city. As time went by, he began to become familiar with other homeless people. One of them was a man named Carlos, who always had a smile on his face, even in the midst of adversity. He became her first friend, and together, they shared life stories that seemed so far away, but at the same time so close. "You won't believe it," said Carlos, as they settled in a corner of a square, away from the biting cold. "I once had a job at a construction company. I made a good living and I even had a car. Everything changed in the blink of an eye." Helen nodded, remembering the life she had before Amanda kicked her out. She also had dreams, hopes, and plans. But now, everything seemed so far away, like a mirage in a desert. "Life is full of surprises, isn't it?" Helen replied, trying to keep her tone light. "Sometimes we get lost along the way." Carlos looked at her with empathy. "And sometimes we find new paths. Do you have someone who cares about you, or someone you care about?" Helen's heart sank at the thought of Amanda. She wanted to believe that there was love behind the frustration that had built up between them. "My daughter," he began, but his voice trailed off. "She is far, far away from me." "And what happened?" Carlos asked, interested. Helen hesitated, but loneliness encouraged her to open her heart. I raised her with love and sacrifice, but I always felt like I was letting her down. When she finally achieved success, I couldn't be the mother she needed. Carlos listened to her attentively. You did the best you could. Sometimes people pull away because they don't understand what we're going through. But that doesn't mean we don't love them. Hearing those words, Helen felt a thread of hope intertwine in her heart. Maybe somewhere Amanda still cared about her. But life on the streets was not easy. The days passed and she began to adapt to the new reality, learning to survive. He met other residents, like Valeria, a middle-aged woman who sold roses at traffic lights, and Tiago, a young man who always had a magic trick to distract pedestrians and collect some coins. One sunny day, as Helen was selling some objects she had found, she saw a young girl approaching. She was a girl with blonde hair and designer clothes, who was part of the world that had once been hers. The young woman approached a group of friends, laughing and telling stories about the glamorous life she led. "Look, who would have thought you would be here, Helen?" said the girl, approaching. "I'm Amanda's friend. She is glowing. You must be so proud." The young woman's words cut Helen like a knife. The mention of Amanda, now so distant, stirred his emotions. She forced a smile, even though the pain was written all over her face. "Yes, I am. She has always been very talented." Helen's voice was low, almost a whisper. "You know she's been doing big business, don't you?" The girl continued, without noticing the sadness in Helen's eyes. "They say she's getting involved with powerful people. This is incredible." Helen felt a chill run down her spine. Powerful? What did this mean? The pride he felt for his daughter began to mix with worry. What could Amanda be doing, and with whom? Memories of their arguments and expulsion invaded his thoughts, and the desire to protect her grew. I'm not sure what she's doing," Helen said, trying to hide her uneasiness. "Her life is hers, and I just want her to be happy." The young woman smiled, but Helen's expression did not change. What should have been a light conversation became an increasingly heavy burden. After the young woman walked away, Helen sat on a bench in the park, reflecting on everything she had heard. Amanda was living a life of glamour, but what was behind that? Restlessness consumed her, and she felt she needed to know more. That night, as the stars twinkled in the sky, Helen joined Carlos and Valeria to share some food they had obtained. They laughed and told stories, but Helen's mind was far away. "What's the matter with you?" Valeria asked, noticing Helen's worried expression. "Something bothers you. Just thinking about my daughter," Helen replied, sighing. "I heard rumors about her business. I don't know if this is good or bad. Life is full of choices," Carlos said, looking at the sky. "Sometimes the choices we make are not the ones we want." "Do you think she is getting involved with dangerous people?" Helen didn't know how to answer. The uncertainty terrified her. How could I protect Amanda if I didn't know where to find her? His heart was filled with love, but also with fear. "I just want her to be safe." As they spoke, the city pulsed around them, with its bright lights and distant sounds. Helen decided she needed to act. The idea of getting back on his feet and finding Amanda became a flame in his heart. It was time to discover the truth, and perhaps to find a way back to the life he once shared with his daughter. She said goodbye to Carlos and Valeria that night, feeling more determined than ever. The connection she once had with Amanda was still there, and even though life had separated them, she knew she couldn't stand still. It was time to fight, not only for her own dignity, but also for her daughter's safety. With these thoughts in mind, Helen prepared herself for what was to come. A mother's love never dies, and she was willing to face any challenge that came her way. Helen observed the movement of the street, people rushing by, cars honking, and the smell of food from a nearby cart mixing with the fresh morning air. It was a cloudy day, but she felt that something would change in her life. Sitting in a corner, with a small wooden box beside her, she remembered how drastically and painfully life had changed for her in the last 12 months. The image of Amanda, his beloved daughter, was a mix of love and pain, a reminder of what once was and what had been lost. The box that accompanied it contained some crafts that she had made with her rough, calloused hands. It had been a while since I started creating small decorative items, using what I found on the streets and in donations. It helped her pass the time and, in a way, feel useful again. One of the homeless people he had met, a man called Roberto, had taught him some painting and assembly techniques. He always said, "Helen, art is the purest form of resistance. No matter where you are, never lose your value." That gave him strength. "Look, Helen, you're getting good at this," commented Roberto, approaching with a wide smile. He was holding a steaming cup of coffee that he had gotten from an acquaintance. "What are you doing today?" "I'm trying to create some new pieces. This one is a frame I made with pieces of wood I found. Do you think anyone would buy it?" Helen lifted the frame, showing Roberto the work she had done with so much care. "For sure. You just need a good place to display it. Let's try it in the square, which is busier. More people will see you." Roberto patted Helen on the back, encouraging her. "Come on, you can do it." With new energy, Helen began to gather her things. The day could be a watershed. When they arrived at the square, the sun began to emerge from behind the clouds, illuminating the place and bringing an air of hope. With Roberto's help, he set up a small improvised stand with his works of art. He stood next to her, selling some things he had also made. The hours passed and, to Helen's surprise, some people began to stop and admire her work. Two women, attracted by the beauty of the pieces, stopped in front of the stand. "Hello, this is beautiful. Did you do all this?" One of them asked, her eyes shining with admiration. "Yes, I did it myself," Helen replied, feeling a wave of pride invade her heart. "These are pieces made with love and a little creativity. I would love to buy a frame for my son. He loves to draw. How much does it cost?" The woman asked, already taking out her wallet. Helen hesitated for a moment, remembering how she used to have a comfortable life, but at the same time, the desire to get back on her feet spoke louder. I think 5 reis is fine," I said, a little unsure. "Just that?" The woman smiled, taking the frame. "Here, take 10. You deserve." Helen watched her walk away, a smile on her face. She was beginning to understand that even in her current situation, there was still room for small triumphs. Meanwhile, across town, Amanda was in a boardroom, surrounded by people who admired her success but actually had dark interests. Since the promotion, she had become involved in a new project that promised great profits, but which also brought her into contact with people of questionable morals. "Amanda, you need to consider partnering with Mr. Santos. He has connections that could take your project to the next level," suggested Daniel, an ambitious colleague, as he leafed through a folder full of documents. "I know, but I heard some rumors about him. I'm not comfortable with the idea of working with someone who has a problematic past," Amanda replied with an expression of discomfort. "Look, we all have a past. What matters is the future, and that future can be bright if you make the right choice," Daniel insisted, his gaze penetrating. Amanda felt a growing tension. There was something about Daniel that made her uneasy. Although he was charismatic and attractive, there was an aura of manipulation in the way he spoke. But the pressure to succeed and the lure of fame were beginning to cloud his judgment. "I don't know, Daniel. I need to think more about this," Amanda replied, feeling a weight in her chest. Meanwhile, Helen sold a few more pieces and made friends with other sellers around. One of them, an elderly woman selling flowers, asked her out for coffee. "You're new here, aren't you?" asked the woman as they walked to a small kiosk. "Her name is Maria. I'm Helen. It's the first time I'm selling here." The young woman smiled shyly. "Don't worry, darling. Here everyone helps each other. If you need anything, just call me. Life has its turns, and one day you can be up there, and the next down here. But the important thing is to never give up." Maria's words resonated with Helen, who felt more confident the more she engaged with the people around her. That exchange of experiences was valuable and helped her feel less alone. At the end of the day, Helen returned to the corner where she usually sat. He opened the small box and counted his money. It wasn't much, but it was enough to buy something to eat and maybe even a new blanket. She no longer felt as lost as before. There was a purpose in her life now, and it made her believe she could start over. Back at the office, Amanda found herself increasingly surrounded by people who seemed more interested in exploiting her success than actually helping her. Deep down, she knew she needed to be careful, but ambition was overshadowing her intuition. Conversations became more frequent about investments and risks, but what really worried her was the shadow that hung over her choices. Amanda, you really need to make up your mind. Don't let the opportunity pass you by, Daniel insisted with a persuasive expression. I know, but Amanda hesitated, feeling an overwhelming pressure. Don't be naive. The business world waits for no one. You have to be quick and decisive, he concluded, looking at her with an intensity that made her uneasy. As the two talked, something inside Amanda stirred. A feeling of discomfort grew in her chest. An inner voice whispered that she was moving away from who she really was, and that all of this could lead to consequences she wasn't ready to face. Back in the square, Helen looked at the city lit up at dusk, thinking about Amanda and how their lives had taken such opposite directions. She didn't know what the future held, but she was sure that, regardless of the difficulties, she was willing to fight to protect her daughter. There was something more at stake now, and she was determined to discover the truth, even if it meant facing her own fears. So, as the city's lights began to shine, two lives were intertwined in an uncertain destiny, each in their own way, seeking redemption and the chance for a fresh start. Helen watched the gala event unfold with a mix of anxiety and determination. The elegant ballroom was lit by crystal chandeliers, and soft music filled the air, creating an atmosphere of sophistication that contrasted sharply with her new reality. Dressed in a simple outfit, which she had obtained from donations, she felt like an intruder in that world of glamour. But the urgency of the situation drove her to move forward. Amanda needs to know, she muttered to herself as she adjusted her disheveled hair. The idea of disguising yourself and joining the party wasn't just a strategy. It was her only chance to protect her daughter. She had heard rumors about the dubious deals involving her daughter, and, even without a clear plan, she knew she needed to act. Helen took a hesitant step into the room, feeling the guests' gaze on her skin. With each step, memories of when Amanda was a child invaded her mind. The games, the smiles, the happiness. However, those moments were now overshadowed by an abyss of resentment and pain. She couldn't let pride or shame stop her from doing what was right. I can't just stay here and watch, he thought. In the distance, he saw Amanda, surrounded by a crowd of admirers and associates. Her daughter's smile was radiant, but there was something in her eyes that her mother recognized, a shadow of concern. Helen held her breath and started to walk towards her, but was soon stopped by an elegant waiter who offered her a glass of champagne. No, thank you, Helen replied, her voice sounding firmer than she felt. She continued her march towards her daughter, but meanwhile, the atmosphere around her seemed to suffocate her. The laughter and lively conversations were no longer a sign of celebration, but a clear disconnect between what really mattered and what was superficial. When she finally got closer to Amanda, Helen hesitated. The young woman was among a group of well-dressed people, laughing and making toasts. Helen's heart sank to see her so happy, but at the same time, she felt a pang of despair. What could she say? How could I interrupt that moment? Hi, Mommy. You came, Amanda exclaimed, already noticing her mother's presence. Her daughter's tone was cheerful, but the expression on her face changed when she noticed the distrust and concern in Helen's eyes. For a brief moment, the connection between them seemed to resurface, but it was soon interrupted by a burly man who approached. Who is this? The man asked with an appraising look. Helen didn't like the way he looked at her, as if she were an object to be examined. It's my mother, Amanda replied, her voice a little hesitant. She's here for the party. Ah, how beautiful. A true story of overcoming, isn't it? The man smiled, but his gaze was cold. I hope you don't mind, but we are busy with business matters. Can you give us a little time? Helen felt a knot form in her stomach. The way he spoke, as if Amanda were just an asset to be exploited, made her uneasy. She realized that this was not the kind of company her daughter should have. The desire to protect Amanda grew within her, but how to do that without causing another rift between them? "Wait a minute, please," Helen said, searching for courage in her voice. "Amanda, can we talk alone for a moment?" Amanda looked at the man, who was clearly irritated by the interruption. "Mom, now is not a good time. Have to focus on business." "But it's business I want to talk about," Helen insisted, her tone rising a little. "Amanda, you don't know who you're getting involved with." The man looked at her with disdain. "I don't think your mother understands how things work here. Does she? What do you think, Amanda?" "That's none of your business," Amanda responded, her voice rising. "She's my mother and I can talk to her if I want." Helen saw the tension grow between the two. Amanda's heart was torn, and she realized she needed to act quickly. "Amanda, please. I've seen things. Things you need to know. It's not safe here." "Security? What do you mean by that?" Amanda frowned, clearly confused. "Mom, you're talking like I'm in danger." Helen felt that time was running out. "I can't explain it right now, but there are people here who don't mean well. I promised myself I wouldn't let you get hurt again. But you left me," Amanda shouted, frustration showing on her face. "You didn't have the courage to stay when I needed you most." The man intervened again, laughing cynically. "Look, a real family soap opera. Amanda, let's leave that for later, shall we? We have business to attend to." "No," Helen said, determination growing. "We need to talk now. It's important." That's when, from the other side of the room, one of Amanda's associates began to approach. He looked nervous, like he was carrying a weight on his shoulders. Helen recognized the look of concern on his face and felt the situation was about to get worse. "Amanda, please listen," Helen began, but the young woman was already turning to her associate. "Hi, Lucas. What's going on?" Amanda asked, concern replacing her frustration. Lucas hesitated, looking from Helen to Amanda. "Yeah, I don't know how to say this, but some things you need to know about the business aren't right." Helen felt a surge of hope. "See? You can't ignore this. Amanda, we need to talk about what's going on." Amanda looked between the two, confusion filling her face. "What are you trying to tell me?" "They're manipulating you, Amanda," Helen exclaimed, the urgency in her voice echoing in the room. "Can't you see? These people aren't here for you. They're here for what they can gain." The man who had spoken earlier approached again, his smile turning into an angry expression. "That's ridiculous. You have no idea what you're talking about." "But I do," Helen replied, her voice firm. "I know you are involved in something dangerous, and I will not let my daughter become a victim of it." The room was tense, and the guests' gazes turned to the trio. Amanda, with her heart racing, felt the pressure of the situation. She wanted to believe her mother, but the fear of confronting the truth was paralyzing. "I need answers," Amanda finally said, looking between Lucas and the man. "What is happening?" The man cast a disdainful look at Lucas, who hesitated to respond. "It's nothing you need to worry about, Amanda. Let's discuss this in private." "No. Now," Amanda demanded, her voice ringing firm. "If there's something wrong, I want to know." Helen watched her daughter steady herself, strength she hadn't seen in a long time. It was a sign that there was still hope, even in the midst of the darkness that surrounded it. The battle was far from over, but in that moment, she knew she needed to stay by Amanda's side no matter what. Helen walked through the familiar streets, now with a different, more determined look. In recent months, she had adapted to life on the streets, learning to survive and find strength where before there was only despair. Alongside her new friends, each carrying their own scars and stories, she began to plan her next move. What was once a life of solitude had now become a bond of mutual support, and together they formed a small community that helped each other face daily challenges. "Are you thinking what I'm thinking?" asked Lucas, a middle-aged man who had become a pillar of the group. He looked at Helen with an expression of curiosity and hope. "If you have something in mind, I'm in." "We need to expose that man who is manipulating Amanda," Helen replied, her tone firm and decisive. "He's not just a bad influence. He is enveloping her in a world that could take away everything she has achieved." The group gathered around her, their expressions varying between concern and determination. Helen felt that now was the time to act. "I saw the way he treated her at the gala. He doesn't care about her, only what he can gain. And if we do nothing, she could lose everything, including her own safety." "But how do we do that?" asked Mara, a young woman who had also lived through difficult times and had now joined the group. "She won't believe us, especially after what happened." "We need proof," Helen declared, looking each of them in the eye. "If I can gather information about his illegal activities, maybe I can convince Amanda. I can't leave her alone in this." Helen's friends agreed, and together they began to devise a plan. Over the next few weeks, they spread out across the city, observing the man and gathering information. Helen used her observational skills, trained over years as a mother and executive, to capture details that others might overlook. The group organized secret meetings, where they exchanged information and discussed strategies. Meanwhile, Amanda was increasingly restless. Interactions with his new social circle, which previously seemed promising, began to generate distrust. She noticed furtive glances and whispers among associates, as well as a growing sense that something was wrong. She felt as if she were trapped in a web that was slowly tightening around her. "Are you okay, Amanda?" asked Carla, a coworker who was part of the new group. "You seem distant." "I'm just thinking," Amanda replied, looking out the office window, where the city pulsed with movement. Something doesn't feel right. I feel like I can't trust everyone." Carla arched her eyebrow. "Sometimes people are not what they seem. You should pay attention to what's going on around you." Amanda nodded, but insecurity bothered her. What had started as a network of promising contacts now seemed more like a trap. Determined to uncover the truth, she began investigating the activities of her new circle. Using his research skills, he began searching for information about associates and their connections. One silent night, while browsing social media and discussion forums, Amanda found something that kept her on alert. One name stood out among the associates: the man who had approached her at the gala. Lucas, one of the group's most influential members, had a murky background. Amanda began to put the pieces together and question whether the ambition that had led her there was, in fact, an illusion. "You're more focused than ever, Amanda," Carla commented when she saw her working late. "What are you looking for?" "I'm just trying to understand more about the people I'm dating," Amanda replied, not wanting to go into too much detail. "I feel like there's something that doesn't fit." "It's always good to be cautious," Carla said, leaning on the table. "If you need help, I'm here." Amanda smiled gratefully, but inside her there was a mixture of anxiety and determination. Meanwhile, Helen and her group continued to collect evidence, each day bringing new data that increased the severity of the situation. The man, whose name was Marcos, was involved in illegal activities that could ruin Amanda's career. Helen couldn't allow that to happen. One cold morning, Helen met with her friends in a park. "I think we're close to having what we need," she said, holding a folder with several notes. "I got information about one of his businesses that not only seems suspicious, but could also be linked to a larger network of corruption." Lucas looked at the folder with a mix of admiration and concern. "What if he finds out we're after him? This could be dangerous, Helen." "I know, but what is more dangerous? Standing by while he manipulates Amanda or taking action and trying to save her?" Helen looked at each of them, seeking courage. She may not understand now, but when all this comes to light, she will need to know she is not alone. The group agreed, and the atmosphere was charged with determination. They knew the risk was great, but the loyalty and friendship they had built drove them to move forward. Helen was ready to face the world, not just for herself, but for Amanda. In the days that followed, she became a shadow, following Marcos to his appointments and meetings. He observed every movement, every conversation, noting details that could be crucial. The hard work began to pay off, and with each new piece of information, The conviction that he needed to reconnect with his daughter grew. One night, while Marcos was in a restaurant with other associates, Helen decided it was time to act. She hid around a corner watching the meeting. The atmosphere was full of laughter and conversation, but the tension was palpable. Helen couldn't help feeling that this was a turning point. "So, is the plan underway?" Marcos asked, leaning forward, with an expression that mixed ambition and disdain. "Yes, everything is falling into place. Soon, we will have full control," replied one of the associates, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Helen felt a chill run down her spine. The conversation he overheard was a confirmation of his worst suspicions. They were about to carry out a coup that could irreversibly implicate Amanda. Adrenaline coursed through her veins, and she knew she needed to act quickly. With her heart racing, Helen walked away from the scene, deciding it was time to confront Amanda again. The fight would not be easy, but she was determined to protect her daughter at any cost. Whatever happened next, Helen was ready to weather the storm. Helen took a deep breath as she approached the imposing headquarters of the technology company where Amanda worked. The glass building reflected the gray sky, giving it a cold and distant appearance, just like the relationship he had with his daughter. Every step he took towards the entrance was a reminder of the last year of his life, filled with challenges and loneliness. She had become accustomed to living on the streets, but now, armed with information that could change Amanda's fate, her determination overcame her fear. Upon entering the lobby, Helen felt like an intruder. The atmosphere was vibrant, full of well-dressed people, chatting animatedly about innovative projects. The difference between them and her was stark. Their shabby clothes and careless appearance contrasted with the elegance of the employees. But it didn't matter. What mattered was the urgency of his mission. She headed to the front desk, her heart beating fast. "Hi, I need to talk to Amanda. It's urgent," he said, trying to contain the anxiety in his voice. The receptionist, courteously but firmly, responded, "Sorry, but you need to schedule a meeting. Amanda is busy." Helen felt frustration rising, but she didn't have time for this formality. "Please, it's about a very serious matter. It's about her safety." The receptionist hesitated, noticing the intensity in Helen's eyes. After a few seconds that seemed like an eternity, she decided to make an internal call. "One moment, please." As she waited, Helen looked around, her gaze settling on the photos on the wall that showed Amanda at gala events and in advertising campaigns. She looked so happy, so fulfilled, but what Helen knew could shatter that image. When the receptionist returned, she indicated that Amanda was willing to see her. Helen took the elevator to Amanda's floor. As she left, the sight of her daughter's office left her temporarily stunned. It was modern, packed with cutting-edge technology and decorated with impeccable taste. But what impacted her most was seeing Amanda, focused on her work, so different from the girl she used to hug. "Amanda!" Helen exclaimed, her voice coming out louder than she intended. Amanda looked up, surprised and confused. "Mom, what are you doing here?" The tone of his voice was a mixture of disbelief and discontent. "I need to talk to you. It's urgent." Helen felt adrenaline course through her body. "It's about the man you're getting involved with." Amanda frowned. "What do you know about him?" "I know he's not who you think he is. He's manipulating you, Amanda. He has a history of illegal dealings, and I have proof." Helen took an envelope out of her bag, her hands shaking slightly. "See this?" Amanda hesitated, but curiosity overcame suspicion. As he looked through the documents, his face began to change. The color drained from her cheeks, and her eyes widened as she read the information her mother had collected. "How did you get that?" "It doesn't matter now. What matters is that you're in danger, and you need to get away from it." Helen felt a rush of emotion when she saw the look of concern on her daughter's face. "Please, you need to listen to me." Before Amanda could respond, the door opened abruptly, and the man who had been manipulating Amanda entered the office. He had an aura of confidence, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Amanda, honey, are you okay?" He looked at Helen with disdain. "Who is this woman? Some old woman trying to get into your business?" Helen stepped between Amanda and the man, her determination renewed. You can't keep this up, Amanda. He can't be trusted. You need to listen to what I'm saying. Amanda, lost in shock and confusion, looked between the two. What are you doing here? Who are you? The man, smiling ingratiatingly, said, She's just trying to ruin your career. Amanda, don't get carried away by this woman. She doesn't know anything about you or your business. I know enough to know you're a threat, Helen snapped, her voice firm. And I'm willing to take this to the authorities if you don't stay away from my daughter. The man laughed, a cold, sharp sound. Do you really think you can intimidate me? You have no idea who you're dealing with. Maybe you should start worrying about what I have in hand. Helen held up the envelope, showing the documents as proof that she had valuable information. You're finished. The tension in the air was palpable. Amanda, now realizing the gravity of the situation, began to feel adrenaline rush through her veins. Mom, are you sure? I'm so confused. I know you don't want to believe it, but he's using you, Amanda. Look around you. See what's happening. Helen exclaimed, her heart beating wildly. At that moment, the door opened again, and 2 police officers entered, alerted by an anonymous phone call that Helen had made shortly before confronting Amanda. We're here to talk to a certain. One of the officers began, but stopped when he saw the scene before him. What's going on here? Asked the other, his critical gaze scanning the room. What do you want with her? The man turned around, trying to adopt a posture of control, but his confidence was beginning to slip. We're here to investigate some allegations about you. One of the officers responded, advancing toward the man. You are welcome to accompany us. The man's expression changed drastically. He tried to protest, but the police were firm. You can't do that. I'm a respectable businessman. Not because of what we have here, one of the officers said, as another began to remove the man from the office. Helen felt a mix of relief and tension when she saw the man being taken away. He turned to Amanda, who now had tears in her eyes. Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Helen walked over, wrapping Amanda in a tight hug. It's okay, honey. I'm here now, and we'll get through this together. Amanda cried, her sobs echoing in the office. I'm sorry about everything. I should have listened to you sooner. The past doesn't matter. What matters is that we are here now, said Helen, stroking her daughter's hair. Let's rebuild this. The officers left the office with the man in handcuffs, and the reality of what had happened began to set in. Amanda looked at her mother, a new glimmer of hope lighting her gaze. What are we going to do now? We will use your influence to help those who need it, just as I needed you, Helen replied with determination. And let's help each other this time. Amanda nodded, feeling the strength of love and reconciliation between them. Life had been difficult, but now, together, they were ready to face any challenge that came their way. With a new purpose, they left the office, side by side, ready to rewrite their stories.